I came up with this bum, 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 bum. And then Midge got the mini moog and down. This is the sound of the future. This is what we've got to do. Boo, boo, da do do, da do do, da do da. And it went, tush, tush, boo, boo. And then there was another one, thud, thud. I just played the records. And we were suddenly Kraftwerk, you know. And people are going out to the disco and saying, I was born to be alive.
So, Rusty Egan, welcome, first of all. In terms of, well, particularly the 1980s, in terms of music and culture, I think you've been one of the most underrated and overlooked people, which is, you know, surprising to me, really. And that's only sort of really come to me when I've been doing the research and looking into what your legacy has been, which I hope we talk about through this interview. But I want to start with your early life. And what sort of music and culture, when you were a very young child, were you exposed to at home?
I'm Irish, and my parents had a band, and they were Irish musicians playing Irish music, and then obviously pop music from the 60s in the Irish part of London, Kilburn. But I didn't come from Kilburn. My parents had a band, and basically my father had three brothers, and they all lived in London, and they all frequented Irish pubs and clubs, and I got dragged along as like the kid sitting on the step with a Coca-Cola and a packet of crisps and told to be quiet, you know.
So did they value a cultural life, or did they see their life not as a cultural life, just as sort of like a musician's, almost like a traveling musician's life, I reckon?
No, they had 7 children, my parents, and they eventually got all of them to England. I came to England when I was 6, and my parents had already been in England about 7 or 8 years, and I had 3 older siblings, 4 older siblings, but only 3 of them were in England, and another sister I'd never even met, who was younger. She was like 3 or 4 years old. So basically, my parents came to England and worked like Johnny Lydon often points out, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And that's what they got. That was their welcome. Just like now in today, the Brexit, we just thrown everybody out, you know.
So how do you think that not growing up essentially for those first 6 years with your parents, then how do you think that affected you in your life? Did it make you a tougher person or change you in any way?
Well, this is very, very weird because I personally, as soon as you get into shrink stuff, I just slam the door on it. I don't go there. But I obviously was affected by everything that happened in my life, which accumulated in a massive loss, to be honest with you. And as soon as I open my mouth on the subject, most people are like, yeah, yawn, forget it, yada, yada. So I don't really go there, you know.
Right. I mean, I've done about 6 years of therapy, so I'd be...
Yeah. I don't really want to go there. I want to just take each day as it comes from now. But yeah, there was a very dark period in my life, and that would have all accumulated from my upbringing.
So what actually got you into drumming? What attracted you?
Well, number one, my parents kept booking drummers, and the bloke would show up and he'd look like Elvis, and he seemed a bit cool, and he had a car, and pick up my parents, and they'd go off to a pub with a sax and an organ and a drummer and meet the bass player. And then I really liked the drums, as in watching my parents, and the drummer would do really cool things, and I kind of could tap away on a couple of tin boxes and biscuit tins, which I'd already done from when I was in Ireland, as a matter of fact. I remember it. So when I got to about 13 or 14, my eldest brother gave me a drum kit. and I immediately played it. It was like Christmas, you know. So I was a natural drummer. Yeah.
So your parents, did they know Phil Seaman, or were they fans of him?
My dad was a fan of Phil Seaman. Yeah, he used to talk about him. But I then listened to my dad's record collection and found Jacques Dijonet and lots of jazz drummers. And then the drummer that was with my parents was a guy called Richard James Burgess, who was a New Zealander. And
the Richard James Burgess?
Yeah, he played drums with my parents. And then he said, I'll come round on a Saturday and early before I pick up your parents in my Aussie van and go off to the gig. And I'll give you a couple of lessons, paradiddles and stuff. So I had a practice pad and a couple of nice drumsticks and left, right, left, left, right, left, right, And then I went to see his band, which was called Landscape. So I was about probably 17 then. And I went to see them, and he got me to go to the National Youth Jazz Orchestra on a Saturday morning with Bill Ashton. So basically I was following jazz, which is really difficult drumming. And I was into Bill Bruford and, intricate drummers, Billy Cobham. So basically I really got into drumming. Like, there's a film, isn't there? There's a film about a drummer. They brought it out. I forgot what it's called. But anyway, I was like really pushing myself like you would any sport or ballet or something. But really, I was never going to be as good as these drummers in jazz drumming terms. And of course, I did love pop music, David Bowie, Roxy music, And I really liked Simon Kirke, who was the drummer in Bad Company, All Right Now. And at about 18, I found the local club, disco, and it had a band on Monday night. And they were called Bojangles. And I went there, and the drummer had a 26-inch bass drum, not a 20-inch or a 22-inch. He had this massive. He had a cowbell. He had a 6-inch deep Ludwig snare. He had a Ludwig Speed King pedal, 18-inch ride, and a couple of 16-inch Zildjian crashes. And he had, on his hi-hat, he had a tambourine attached to it. So the bottom line was, he was a very straightforward drummer, and he had a very powerful drum kit, like rock. They were doing Queen and, Led Zeppelin. And the bottom line was, the room was full of hairy blokes with sheepskin coats and long hair and sort of flares and platform shoes. And I wasn't a hairy bloke, and I was like more of a skinny mod, But I liked the drumming more than anything. So it sort of changed my view of, well, you're never going to be the greatest drummer in the world, but that drummer, Bojangle, well, he's the greatest drummer in that band, So I kind of started to go a bit more forward to the floor,
I mean, you mentioned the National Youth Orchestra, and it seems like a little bit like a parallel to the Elton John story, that his study wasn't something that he really wanted to do, but it seems like it gave him something. And you mentioned it was like that film Whiplash.
There you go, yeah.
Which is a really tough representation of being a drummer. I mean, the teachers in Whiplash were pretty hard on them. Was it like that in reality?
Well, no, I was pushing myself. I didn't have a teacher. And the National Youth Jazz Orchestra had 4 drummers, like a football team. And you were in the reserve. And when Bill said, right, you're on, you basically had to read the music. You had to read the drum music called the dots. Well, every time Bill said, right, you're on, it was fairly obvious the other 3 drummers were way better than me. And Richard, which is much more interesting, had access to a guy called Dave Simmons. And he gave me the equivalent, the size of a laptop without a case, just a motherboard and some jack plugs. And he said, touch that. And I touched this jack plug with my finger, and it went, boo, 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 boo. And I went, oh, you go touch that one there. And then there was another one, thud, thud, you know. So I could go thud, thud, boo, boo. And he goes, it's like an electronic drum. And I went, that's amazing, that's amazing. He said, well, you haven't finished building it yet. It's a bloke called Dave Simmons. So I was probably about 19 then, and went auditioning for bands, you know. And one of those bands was The Clash, 1976. I was about 19 in 76. And I played the drums with them. It was the easiest gig in the world. 1, 2, 3, 4. Janie Jones World. It's the Janie Jones World. Can you do this? Yeah. Can you do this one? Career opportunity is the only job you get. Yes. All right, we'll let you know. Can you come back tomorrow? And that went on for 3 months. And basically, we got a gig tomorrow. ICA, you're not playing. Tory Crimes is playing. So I met Terry Chimes. And he goes, I don't know what's wrong with them. They want you to be the fourth integral member of the band and in tune with their politics and England burning with boredom. And I'm so bored with the USA. And of course, me and Terry were like, yeah, all right. You know, not exactly rocket science, is it? So I obviously went around looking for other bands and hadn't gone near the boo at all until 79. So 77, I don't know when Richard first gave me that prototype, Dave Simmons, but it was around, 78, 77. We started recording Visage 78 actually, so it was around that time.
I want to take you back before we get to that era, because I think you said a couple of things that really were key, and that, I'm brought up in an era, and I think we're roughly the same age, where David Bowie was probably the most important person in my world. And you mentioned Bowie and you mentioned Roxy Music, Brian Ferry, and what they represented, not just their music, but what they represented was a big thing. What did Bowie and Ferry represent for you when you were growing up?
Well, fashion and music, for me, always were intertwined. Like I said, I was in a pub full of long-haired hippies, and I wasn't one. But because I was dressed like in a mod, or I was wearing Fred Perry's and Stay Pressed, and I was into fashion. I was like, when I was 15, 16, 17, there's no way I would wear anything that was cool, So I'd gone through Crombie's and I'd gone through that whole teen thing. So by like 1920, all that era, David Bowie kept being the coolest guy. Brian Ferry kept being the coolest guy. The videos, as in performances on TV, the artwork, the album covers, the clothes, that made the music all the better for me, And then there were like really over-the-top stupidness people, like the Sweet with their 3-foot-high boots, and the bloke from the Slade with his funny haircut, and I was really into all that, So fashion and music, and then there was just loads of crap, that had nothing to do with fashion or music, like Brotherhood of Man or all that crap. No, so Bowie, Roxy, and obviously these weird blokes called Kraftwerk who wore suits and had short hair and looked like blokes in an office sitting at a computer. It attracted me, it interested me. Look at album covers, and in those days, that's about all you had. Ralph and Florian album cover, two blokes sitting in a room with egg boxes on the ceiling, surrounded by some synthesizers. I was very interested in that, and Brian Eno, of course,
all that that German era of Neu, Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream.
I did consider them all hippies, though. I considered them all hippies because they were all long-haired hippies, including Kraftwerk, who were in 1971 long-haired hippies. Not that I had anything against hippies, but I just put Jethro Tull and Van der Graaf's Generator and Yes, and I just put them all into prog rock. I didn't really go for prog rock, but whatever his name was, on the keyboards in Yes, Rick Wakeman, surrounded by keyboards. So I was very interested in it. I liked Dave Greenslade. I looked at the pictures of the keyboards, and I liked Tangerine Dream because they did music for films like The Sorcerer, and I loved that. And obviously I loved film scores. And if you look at a lot of films, they were like Shaft, that was a film score. There was Giorgio Moroder did Midnight Express film score. Ennio Morricone, all the spaghetti westerns and all the Italian. No, I love film score music too, but nearly all of them were done by one bloke, and I didn't even like him at all. Don't know what his name was. I can't even remember, but he's obviously the Hans Zimmer of the day. But no, I like synthesizers, but they weren't really on any really great records. Son of My Father by Chippery Tip had a synthesizer on it, and there was probably Popcorn and the Doctor Who theme tune, but there wasn't much. So Roxy Music had a keyboard player, and Brian Ferry sat down at the piano, and Elton John obviously sat down at the piano, but he was singer-songwriter-y. No, I loved the band with a keyboard player, and that was Roxy Music. And Bowie obviously had great keyboard players, and obviously with Mick Ronson doing the orchestrations and arrangements on Lou Reed. And I used to read the credits, I knew who sang backing vocals, who was on bass, and I used to follow musicians like Steve Gadd or, drummers. He played on that, and Herbie Flowers played on that, and Phil Collins played on Brian Eno's album. So I followed musicians, Jaco Pastorius,
The Bowie trilogy, Berlin trilogy, obviously also played heavily into your development and what you clearly really liked.
The Clash, 76, their inauguration to join the band was no Elvis, Beatles or the Rolling Stones. So I'm always quoting, and I've probably said it loads of times, what the Rolling ever done for us. I was always saying to Mick and Joe, yeah, but Lou Reed's all right. Oh, yeah, he's great. Yeah, but Bowie's all right. Yeah, but all the rest of them, and it was always like that. And I'd be going, yeah, but what about Kraftwerk? I'll forget them. It was like, look, Rusty, all that old hippie rock and Rod Stewart, blondes have more fun. What does that mean to a bloke on a council estate? All that. So there was this sort of argument all the time. And anyway, that's why we only listened to reggae. And they had a jukebox in the rehearsal room, which only had reggae. And the album Culture, 2/7 Clash, was the album of the day, and Don Letts was the DJ in the Roxy and only played, dub reggae plates and punk. And then I heard Television Marquee Moon, and I was gone, suddenly it was like American punk, oh, bloody hell, Talking Heads, oh, wow, Blondie, Richard Hell. And the Iggy Pop stuff had always been there, but now Iggy and Bowie quoted on Kraftwerk Trans-Europe Express. Now I started to get it even more. I started to join the dots and go, oh, Hansa by the Wall, German, Neu, Michael Rauder. Oh, it all sort of fell into place. So really, I think Bowie living in Berlin, Iggy being his mate, cleaning up from drugs and rock and roll, a man who felt skinny, anemic, messed up rock star. But with the influence of Brian Eno, who'd already been out and worked with Mobius, Rodelius, suddenly it joined all the dots for me. So the Hands by the Wall is the two Iggy Pop albums, Lust for Life and The Idiot. And it's also the Heroes and the two other albums, his entire 5-year period of albums out there.
Low and Lodger, I think.
Really, Low and Lodger were the soundtrack to the basis of the Blitz. You know, you throw in Grace Jones and all the other stuff, but really that, I mean, I used to play the entire side of Kraftwerk album early, but I then played Jean-Michel Jarre, the whole album early. I like what you'd call now ambient music, you know, Mobius and Cluster. So start to like really long. In the meantime, punk was 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you know. It was becoming less and less important to me, you know. Obviously The Cure, A Forest, 6 minutes long. Oh, I loved all of that stuff. That was all in my sets, you know. So Marquee Moon, you know, that record with television, about 8 minutes long. I started to love all that, you know.
Now, when you were in the Clash, was that when you met Glen Matlock?
Yeah, Mick Jones introduced me. As you can tell, I'm not a shy bloke, and I had a lot of front, and I always have had, and I'm very arrogant, which people find either an asset or a defect. And Mick and I have remained friends 40 years. He said, look, Russ, it's not going to happen, but you should meet Glen. So by that time, I'd stayed friends with the Clash, but never joined them. I actually joined Snatch, who you probably never heard of, who made a record with Brian Eno. Never got out of rehearsal room. I was friends with Billy Idol. I went out to all the Clash gigs, met everyone there, you know, Mark, P from Sniffing Glue. I just met everyone, Adrian Frills, all the journalists, John who was managing Gen X. I saw the Buzzcocks, Slits. I was everywhere. I was out everywhere, every gig. And about a year later, I met up with Glen. He said, I've been thrown out the Pistols. I'm going to put a band together. And so really out of the frying pan into the fire, you know.
Yeah, it was in a way, because you mentioned in the Clash, you didn't really, it wasn't your thing. You know what I mean? You weren't into their politics particularly, and also musically or expressively as a drummer, it wasn't the thing.
I think if you were in a school like I was, and you were just told what to do, like I was, you personally, anybody pulls me aside and says, look, you're having a problem here. Let me explain it to you. You know, if somebody did that outside a nightclub, anything, but just because somebody tells you what to do, you don't automatically do it. So basically, Bernie was telling me, you know, we got 10 drummers, mate, you know, and I said, well, take one of them then. What do I fucking care? It was that kind of attitude. And at the same time, Joe was like, but I like that attitude. And I like Rusty. And he's a bloody great drummer. And the other bloke, he's all right. So it was kind of like the Clash drummer story went on for about a year and a half. It wasn't 5 minutes. And to be honest with you, I got top of the job because he played with Gary Barnacle. And I was playing with the Ruts, who weren't even the Ruts. They were some musicians out in Harrow, where my parents lived. And I said, guys, you need to ring this number. And Dave Ruffy, I gave him my drum kit, sold him my drum kit from the Rich Kids. I mean, I was connected to all the musicians. It was like there's a gig. And Topper, he lived in like Dover. And for him to come up to London for an audition for a band that had management and now a record deal, as far as he was concerned, this was bloody the best thing ever. And when they said, just shut your mouth, cut your hair, wear this outfit, Topper went, yes, sir. 3 bags full, you know, and I should have done the same thing, but I just had that attitude, didn't I? You know, and sometimes your attitude is good for you or it's bad for you. You know that. I don't like your attitude. You know, it's not. I'm not telling anyone to have a bad attitude, but I am telling them to have a self-respect in your own value. You know.
Well, you clearly know what you want. I mean, I think that's something that's really come across, that you actually know what you want. Were the Rich Kids a band where you could bring in? I mean, you brought in Mick Ronson, didn't you? So to produce.
No, that was Glen Matlock. The Rich Kids was Glen Matlock's band, and we tried to do what Glen Matlock wanted. Taking in consideration, he'd already been in the Sex Pistols. He'd already been cited as the main writer of Anarchy and all the rest of it. So when he said, I've got this song, that was it. It was Glen's song. So bottom line was, we did his song Rich Kids because he wanted a Monkees. He wanted We're the Rich Kids, Guys Too Much for You and all that. He never told me, don't do this drum fill or don't do that. But he did say, keep it simple. And I found that difficult, having been a bit of a jazz drummer. But after maybe 6 or 7 songs, Midge and I went, what about Marching Men? About the anti-Nazi. And at the time, Midge and I were like really against all the violence in punk. And there was a lot of violence. And the Sex Pistols fans were being incited by Sid Vicious to hate the Rich Kids. So we had a lot of bottles thrown at us and spitting and, you know, it was pretty violent. So we did this bum 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 da ba 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 bum dum 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 ba 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 bum, and a little military soldiers and obscenities written every place, written by the small man, the stupid human race, never again. And it wasn't Glen's song, but he went, yeah, all right, you know. Of course, Midge had songs like Young Girls, you know, and it was like these were Midge's songs. And I tended to just play the drums. I did question the lyrics, you know, and Glen had a lot of animosity, Only Arsenic, and, you know, he had some songs which were sending a message to Lydon and, you know, whoever. But, you know, I kind of, this is great. I'm very happy in this band. I love Midge, love Steve New, Glen's great. So I was a very happy bunny getting 50 quid a week instead of signing on. Gave my drum kit to Dave Ruffy and bought a new drum kit, you know, that kind of thing.
I mean, Gary Kemp said that the Rich Kids were the bridge, basically, between punk and new romanticism.
Well, because I still liked my fashion, and now I was in a band with an ex-Sex Pistol who was wearing Vivienne Westwood, and I had the money in my pocket to hit the Portobello Road or Acme attractions. I then had the wardrobe to go with it, the lovely T-shirts and the polka dot and leopard skin trousers and a pair of leather trousers and the Westwood boots, you know. So no, I was really into the image, the artwork. Mick Ronson's going to produce the album. Oh, I'm in it. This is it. Midge bought the synth, and I'd already heard boo 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 boo, and I was like, I want to bring in the electronic drums. And if you look at the video of Marching Men, we had the neon lights, which were highly inspired by the David Bowie stage neon light tour, where he had a whole bank of white lights behind him. And he was wearing those brilliant trousers and the lovely granddad T-shirt. I mean, the fashion, the haircut, everything was important to me. So Rich Kids, we were trying to bring that into it, which is what obviously Gary Kemp saw. Oh, they're not punks. And they're not, I don't, what are they? And look what Steve New's wearing, and look at Glenn. It was a mix. The clothes were very important, the videos, all that. You know?
I mean, this is where you met Steve Strange, isn't it? He was a fan of the Rich Kids.
So... Yeah, well, he was a fan of the Sex Pistols, actually. And he'd already been in a band with Chrissie Hynde, and they were called the Moors Murderers. You know, it was all like shock, you know. There was another band. There were some bands coming out with sort of paedophile records and anything to shock people, you know. It was like shock value stuff. And punk music with now, you know, being banned all over the country. And Susie Sue had a Nazi swastika on her clothes, you know. So there was a lot of everybody like shocking people, you know. So we were kind of like, you know, let's try and find our own way. Our artwork and photography was all handled by Glenn. It was Glenn's mate Al McDowell from Rockin' Russians. So Midge and I didn't really have a say-so, you know.
So what did you make of Steve Strange when you first met him?
I thought he was great. I thought he was a great guy. He was like the only gay in the village. I had no idea he was gay. You know, he's just a guy who's really into fashion and really into music and was prepared to, you know, thumb a lift from a lorry driver to get to London and had nowhere to stay. And, you know, he could go to a punk club and then crash on someone's sofa, which happened to be me, you know.
So did you go to the gay clubs with him? I mean, I was in all the gay clubs at that time.
Well, the great thing about it, is I've always been open-minded about anything, you know. And I didn't know that some of the clubs were gay clubs. I was naive. I said, I'm just going to go to this club. And again, like I said, I didn't know he was gay. And I didn't know there were loads of skinheads that were gay. Well, there's skinheads in here and they're kissing. Fucking hell. I was like quite shocked. So it didn't take me long, a couple of visits to a club, and I sort of worked out that there was a whole underworld of men that were, you know, into fashion, into punk, a lot of builders and, you know, people I had no idea in the world were gay. So what did gay mean? It didn't mean anything other than you can't really go around telling people about it. So I didn't go around telling people about it.
No, not in that era. But the other interesting thing, I mean, I'm a gay man, and my straight friends would come with me to a gay club because they could meet women.
Oh, well, I did do very well, thank you very much, from going to gay clubs. And it's a very weird thing because the girls loved gay men, loved how beautiful they all were. And I think became sexually aroused with the music, the dancing, really beautiful guys. And then they'd meet me in the toilet and go, "You're not gay?" No. And it was like a big smile on their face, like I've hit the jackpot here. And, you know, 20-year-old skinny guy in leather trousers and in a band, you know, and he's not gay. Literally parade you to all their friends at the bar. I've met Rusty and he's in a band. Oh, he's not gay. It was like great big, like, can't believe it. And also those girls, they were there because in the straight world, guys would be pushing bottles into other guys' faces if you looked at his girl, you know. It was like really a violent time. So they went to gay clubs.
It's amazing you say that. I forgot how violent it was with the, you know, there was the fascists on the street.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
there was the violence in pubs and clubs. It was incredible.
Well, I've got a piece of music called Ultra V, and I made a video for it, and it's on YouTube, and it starts with Clockwork Orange, and it's basically underneath it says in the late 70s, it was a very violent time and you had to be very brave to go out clubbing to the Blitz Club or whatever. And then there's this video I made to emphasize exactly what life was like when we had the Blitz Club.
So there's Steve Strange, Midge Ure's in the Rich Kids. So tell me about how Visage actually started.
Well, Midge and I became roommates on the tour with Rich Kids and all the gigs and all the things. So we'd be in some horrible Holiday Inn or something and told you got to be up at 7 a.m, so you got to go to bed. And of course, you put the telly on, just crap. So I'd be, I love Bowie, I loved it. Oh, I love your guitar. I want to get the Yamaha SG2000. Oh, wow, John McGee's got that. He's in Magazine. Have you heard of them? No, I haven't. Oh, they're a great band. You should. And basically, have you heard of Ultravox? And he was going, no. I said, oh, you got to hear of Ultravox. They're amazing. Of course, they were all splitting up, all these bands. And I basically was a music, television. Midge hadn't got as much info on music as I had. He had a lot of older music. He's older than me. And he knew about, Alex Harvey Band or Thin Lizzy, and he knew about all these real rock bands, and he'd been in cover bands, in Glasgow, and he could play Thin Lizzy with his eyes closed, which was quite amazing because he ended up going on tour in America with Thin Lizzy with no rehearsal. Just walked down stage when Gary Moore quit. Now, Midge is an amazing, accomplished musician. I was actually doing a gig with him, as in I was the DJ and he was being Midge Ure, and the Human League were headlining, and they had an illness in the band. I think Phil lost his voice, and they're like 30,000 people waiting for Human League, and Midge was doing 30 minutes, and then he was told, can you do an hour and 15 minutes? And he went, yeah, all right, no problem. Got hold of the band and added another hour and 15 minutes and then did another 15-minute encore and stole the show. You've paid 35 quid to see the Human League, and the support bands are all like Johnny H. Jazz and Midge Ure. And you go, oh, he's okay. And he comes down, he does hit after hit after hit. You go, oh my God, I forgot how many hit songs this bloke has written, And then he does Visage, and they're going, oh, I forgot he was in Visage. Then he does the Top of the Pop theme tune. Oh my God, I forgot he did that. You know what I mean? And he does all the Ultravox hits. You forget they had about 10 top 20 tracks. You go, I can't remember that. But when you're there, you suddenly go, oh my God, All Stood Still. Oh my God, Monument. I mean, it was like, he really is an amazingly accomplished musician. But the influence, it's really important, because Steve Strange influenced me immensely. Took me out to all these gay clubs, all these shops, all these hairdressers, a whole world of fashion that I saw the importance. Freddie Burretti, who designed David Bowie's clothes in the 70s, went to the club called the Sombrero. So we went to the Sombrero.
That's the one with the lit dance floor, isn't it?
Yeah, the one with the Adam and the Ants video. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Steve Barron did that.
I knew Steve Barron. I knew Siobhan Barron, Cucumber. Yeah. And then he did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, didn't he?
Yeah, it's still going strong. So, okay, now Visage is sort of at the start, and you decided to do a cover as the demo, I think, the Yeager and Evans track in the year 2525.
What happened was that my collection of records, I got to sort of spend a lot of time with Midge, and he was living in a bedsit, So I was playing him Phil Collins playing the drums on the B side of King's Lead Hat, which is called RAF, the Red Army Faction, taking him to late night cinema and watching Fassbinder movies and Polanski and all this. And basically, I had a very powerful persona. He got a phone call to join Thin Lizzy, and I got a phone call to join the Skids. And by this time, I had the actual SDSC drum pads and a CR78 drum machine, which was used on Fade to Grey, you know, the intro. So the point was, I'm mad on this type of music, and Midge is going, Hiroshima Mon Amour, what a song! What is that drum machine? I said, it's the CR77. But there's a new one out, 78, you know. Anyway, so we were in equipment, and Midge had the Yamaha CS30 or 80, I'm not sure which one. So we got this demo time at EMI, and I'd got hold of a magazine by then, and I got hold of John McGeoch, who I was loving John McGeoch, and he played the sax. So I said, you got to join this band I'm putting together and play sax. I've already got a guitarist, Midge Ure, but of course I'd love you to play guitar. So I came up with this drum pattern, and then Midge got the mini moog and did the guitar. John McGeoch did da-do-do, on the saxophone, inspired by Low, you know, in Bowie's sax on Low. And that's called The Dancer, because of me. I wanted to call it The Dancer. I wanted people to dance to the music. And then we said, let's try the drum machine and the Dave Simmons drums. And the perfect track was in the year 2525. So that's the SDSC drums. And then Midge got on the vocoder. And we were suddenly Kraftwerk, you know. And that was it. We were like, this is the sound of the future. This is what we've got to do, you know. And I'd gone to Berlin and written blocks on blocks, as in the words, written all the words, because I stood by Die Mauer, which is the wall in German. And I went out to Düsseldorf and met Kraftwerk. So I was like armed with all this music. And by now, Steve's my non-paying flatmate. I'm going to stay for a night or a week, a month, a year. Yeah, all right, mate. Yeah. So I got this flatmate, and we moved into Karen O'Connor, Des O'Connor's daughter. She had a flat in Notting Hill Gate, which was right opposite the Gate Cinema. So I spent all my nights watching movies in there, which were highly influential. And Midge came along too. And I think Vienna is based on The Third Man. It wasn't the city wasn't Vienna, was it? In The Third Man, it was the one with the big wheel. Got a big wheel. Was it
Salzburg? Was it?
Anyway, it was. I'm not sure it was Vienna, but anyway, The Third Man, the film, and Orson Welles. He was a massive influence on me. Citizen Kane. I mean, come on, I'm going to bore your listeners. Just, you know.
No. I love all this. They're also sort of parallel to that. I think that must have been the time where you started to instigate with Steve, I presume, or I don't know if it was you alone, the Blitz Club.
What happened was we went out to the clubs, and he took me to all the clubs, and I heard all the DJs, and I took from them what I thought was great. Le Vion Rose by Grace Jones, I Feel Love, From Here to Eternity, Kathmandu. There was like a load of European music, Space, Magic Fly. There was a load of George Moroder, The Chase, that basically added to my record collection, television, you know, all the records I had, Bowie, Kraftwerk, Ultravox, And I basically said, look, it's all right, these gay clubs. I like the girls too. And I think that we should get our own place on a Tuesday, because the violent thugs don't go out on a Tuesday. And we could find some little dive. So there were a lot of what you call clip joints, where drunk, wealthy people who were out in Soho were looking for a red light, and they'd end up in some basement with some girl trying to sell them a £200 bottle of champagne that had a label stuck on it, but really was a $9.99 bottle of champagne. And they were called a clip joint. So basically, we found a clip joint called Billy's, and we told the bloke, there's no one in here. You got no one here. We'll bring 100 people here. And he was like, yeah, really? On a Tuesday in November? Yeah. In the recession? You know. Well, none of that meant nothing to us. It's 50p to get in. And it was like 75p or a pound for a drink. So I just played the records, and we invited everyone. So the Blitz came after I went to Berlin and collected all those records and went to Dusseldorf. So it was all like the late 78, early 79. And that was when I was recording with the Skids, and Midge was in touring with. So we basically recorded a couple of demos, i.e. for this project. And Midge came up with the name Visage, which means face. And we needed a face. And it wasn't going to be me or Midge. So we'll get someone, a sort of Grace Jones, a sort of Bowie. And if you look at disco records, none of them write anything. You know, Grace Jones doesn't write songs. Amanda Lear doesn't write songs. They're all these disco divas that sang songs. They were produced by people like Georgia Moroder or John Luongo or someone. So Tom Moulton. There were all these massive records in clubs, you know, Born to Be Alive, Born to Be Alive. There were all these like disco-y records. And these pop stars had number ones all over the world, but nobody knew who they were. Patrick Juvet. And it was like Sheila B. Devotion. And I thought, no, disco dance music made with synthesizers with a star like Bowie. Gary Newman didn't exist then, you know, so there wasn't anyone, you know, and that's what we thought Visage would be. He, the star, would go out to all these nightclubs and lip sync to Fade to Grey. And we don't have to go anywhere. As a matter of fact, we want to make a video. You know, I'd seen An Englishman in New York by Godley and Cream. And I said to Polydor, we want Godley and Cream. Everything that we wanted, there was a hurdle. Now, you don't make a video. You go on tour of universities as a support band. No, we don't want to do that. Well, we don't want to give you any money and make a video. All right. We'll bloody do it ourselves then. It was all that, you know.
Yeah, Kevin Godley told me about that Englishman in New York track that they had and how that video actually propelled their career as
well, also the guy who did the robots, he ended up doing the Rocket, Herbie Hancock.
Yeah.
And I signed that, believe it or not, because I signed Bill Laswell, who co-wrote that.
Oh, wow.
And he co-wrote I Could Be Wrong, I Could Be Right. I could be black, I could be white. Pill. As a matter of fact, I just came from a meeting. When you open this conversation, what did you say when you opened this conversation? You are probably the most underrated, unknown, bloody, bloody, blah. Remember?
Yeah.
Well, the list is endless of you saying, I didn't know that. I'm the drummer on the scene tune to Top of the Pops. Oh, I didn't know that. I signed Johnny H. Jazz. Oh, you didn't know that. I could just keep going. I made Afrika Bambaata's biggest tune, The Wild Star. I didn't know that. Yeah. Futura 2000, DST, Celluloid Records, Alan Vega, Z Records, Michael Zilka, Michael Esteban. I played all of them records, Kid Creole, August Darnell. I could go on and on and on and on and on. And people say, I didn't know that. And the reason I didn't know that is because I wanted to be exactly what Midge Ure and I did with the face, Visage. Well, nobody needs to know that. I let other people have the credit. I'm the drummer and the skids. Oh, I didn't know that. There's a CR78 on Charade, a song on the Skids album. And if you listen to it, it sounds like Enola Gay, except it was recorded a year before. I mash them together when I do an audience with Rusty Egan. As a matter of fact, an audience with Rusty Egan, there's people saying, I didn't know that. And then they ask questions, Q&A. I've got one on the 30th of November.
So the Blitz Club was in between two art colleges, wasn't it? It was between...
No, it wasn't in between. Where it was located was irrelevant to the fact that there were art students who had nowhere to go in a violent, terrible, depressed time. You're in London to study art. You've got away from Scunthorpe, and it's even worse in London. And there's like rubbish piled high. Everyone's on strike. Maggie Thatcher shouting and screaming about the new future that she's going to build if she gets voted in. The Labour unions are all being ridiculed by Rupert Murdoch, who's going to close down all the printing. It was a terrible time. The punks are fighting the skinheads on the King's Road. There's violence in the football, and the thugs are fighting each other. And it was a bloody horrible, abysmal time. And in the meantime, Rod Stewart drops an album, and Eric Clapton drops 461 Ocean Boulevard, and everyone's in LA driving Rolls Royces, and the Clash are singing about bloody violence. So it was kind of like, we don't want to have a part of anything. And Saturday Night Fever is the biggest movie ever, and people are going out to the disco and saying, I was born to be alive.
I mean, the other thing...
It'd beat you up if you were gay.
I mean, the other thing about the Blitz Cup, you got Steve Strange on the door, you got Boy George as the coat check person, you got you as the DJ bringing all these, amazing tracks and really breaking them in Britain. You got Marilyn, you got all these fashion designers, future film directors. This crowd was really quite amazing. Did you know at the time that this was going to be so important?
I'm so arrogant, aren't I? There's a film called Tramps.
Simon Heggo, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And absolutely brilliant. Judy Blame, absolutely brilliant. All the artwork, all the covers, the Visage album cover, Spandau artwork. It was the punk attitude. We're going to make our own video, make our own art, make our own clothes, design our own logo. We did everything. Spandau Ballet did everything. They just came in and saw it all and said, we want some of that. So I introduced them to Richard James Burgess, said, you've got to get the music right. As a matter of fact, everywhere I went, Record Mirror, Paul Morley, Melody Maker, the powerful people couldn't stand me. Look, Seals and Crofts' new album doesn't mean a fucking thing. That's what I was like. They were working on the new Seals and Crofts album, and then they were going to deliver a new Eagles album. And I was like, doesn't mean a fucking light. And of course, Boy George hadn't made a record. Steve Strange and me had possibly released one single called Tar on Martin Rushent's defunct record label. Punk was nearly over. This Sting was the star of punk. Adam and the Ants hadn't recorded Kings of the Wild Frontier. Depeche Mode didn't exist. Human League were an underground art school band making, noises and bleeps. Glen was just another art school bloke who made a record in his bedroom, Daniel Miller. The record industry had people that flew around the world that were internationally important people, and they were going to sell millions of albums of the next. Whatever that didn't mean a light to us, That's the point. Actually, the Clash released a song called Complete Control. And they wanted control. And you'll always be told you don't have any control. And as a matter of fact, George Michael, who was a Camden Palace kid, and obviously with Pepsi and Shirley and, friends of all of us, he was told by Fred, was his name Freddie? Tommy Mottola, stop hanging around with faggots. Elton John, stop hanging around with faggots. We own your ass. You're going to do what we tell you to do. And he said, well, I'm never going to make another record for this company as long as you're the head of this company. And he didn't make a record for 7 years. Tommy Mottola married Mariah Carey. And he said, we're going to put our money into Mariah Carey. Arrogant record company people today are even more arrogant than ever, which is you can't get anywhere. We don't care if you've got 1 million, 3 million, 5 million streams or plays. Kanye West has got 500 million plays. You don't mean anything. We control Spotify. We control the radio. We control the music industry. And you're nobody. And the bottom line is, that's right. You do today. But, it's going to change tomorrow. And I hope every musician and creator that's watching this that is 20 years old owns their recording, owns their music publishing, owns their music publishing company, costs £400 to make one, and never, ever does a deal with anybody other than someone that you pay to do something for you. That's it. Like you would pay someone to decorate your house. You can pay the best or you can pay a cowboy. So the bottom line is, I have no money from Visage. Ah, that's terrible. How did that happen? I have no money from the theme tune to Top of the Pops. What? We didn't get any money from Rich Kids for 35 years. I had to fight a court case. It goes on and on and on. George Michael got told you'll never make a record again. Kevin, Dexys Midnight Runners, the Boomtown Rats, everybody got screwed. Everybody. David Bowie got screwed by his manager. Everybody got screwed. As far as I'm concerned, the music industry has done nothing but screw the creators, and is now even more so. Even more so. Have you seen the profits? Have you seen the billions and billions of profits that they're making? They're making over 30 million a day. A day. Can you get them to raise the streaming rate? No. What do I sound like? Angry young man? No. Along comes an Elon Musk and says, oh, you own your own copyright. You own your own music. Well, there's this new thing now called a blockchain. You know about that, don't you? Yeah, and you know about smart contract where everybody can see. You know about transparency. Yeah. Well, why don't you just put your music here, own it, watch it, control it, and look at the plays and streams all over the world and pay everybody instantly in a cryptocurrency? Well, yeah, that's what we want to do. But every time anyone does it, they get shut down by the majors who are making 30 million a day. They don't want it. Yeah. Well, just like Elon Musk, one day you'll be looking at the petrol car like it's a steam engine. Well, one day you'll be looking at Spotify like it's a dance it record player. The future will be live, instant, transparent, smart contract blockchain, owned by the creators. And that includes photography. That includes images. Everything will be in a control. You can't use it.
I want to end with one thing, because you also helped a young blonde woman who came over to the UK in the 80s, Madonna. Can you tell me about what you did for Madonna?
I did for Madonna what I've done for 20 other Madonnas. believed in her from the minute I met her. She had a boyfriend who was a DJ like me in Danceteria, cool club.
Jellybean.
And no, before Mark, yeah, the DJ in the Danceteria club, and which is where she did her first performance during the new music seminar. And I used to go over for the new music seminar, and obviously find talent and other people. And they've released my records. All I did was meet a guy who said, my girlfriend's amazing. We got this demo, heard the demo, said, we've got Seymour Stein excited at Sire. And I said, look, get Seymour to call me, because I'd already done a deal with Tainted Love with Seymour. So Seymour used to come and see me all the time. I was his A&R man, more or less. I'm going to go see Rusty in London. He tells me everything, tells me who's playing, you know. We signed the Specimen to him as well. And B-Movie and Six Said Red and loads. Seymour loved what I was doing. So basically, Seymour said, what do you think? I said, I've met this girl. Like me, she's really confident, really arrogant, really full of herself. But you have to be. You have to be. She's going to go around a load of gay clubs. They're going to love her. She's going to perform the dance routine. She's going to say the outrageous stuff. They're going to love her. And of course, I want to put her on at the Camden Palace, and I want to mix her record for her. And that was it. He said, okay, let's see if we can get that together. We'll sign her, and we'll get the master parts to you in London. So we did. That's what I did. And put her on twice, actually, and got her on at the Hacienda. So basically, I put Frankie Goes to Hollywood on when they were unknown. I put everyone on. Depeche Mode, unknown. You know, you don't have to be famous. And that's why I'm like, now, I get misunderstood by idiots online. You know, what do you have to do to get you to remix my record? Make a really good song.
Rusty, I just want to say at the end, I got the utmost respect for what you achieved, for what you actually did, particularly in British culture, to bring all those amazing artists, for your own music and for what you've been involved in. So at the end, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and keep making the music.
Don't forget the legals.
No, I know. It's going to be a good one. Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.